Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Alison Smith. Good morning to you, Alison.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. You are a facilitator, a breakthrough and creative coach, a speaker, podcaster, a poet. What are you not? And also the author of the book Can't See the Woods for the Trees. And we're going to be exploring using metaphors in the context of business, how we can use them and be powerful ways to help us in our business. But before we go there, Alison, what do you love about what you do?
I had a session the other week and I realised that some of what I love is not knowing what somebody's going to say. So I don't like overly planning things. I like turning up and sort of having to think in the moment and ask the right question to help somebody. And I think this is the other bit that I enjoy. So I enjoy the head bit of trying to come out with the right question. But I also then love how that question facilitates somebody opening up a situation and seeing it differently. So I get very excited about their reaction when they suddenly get a realization that was there all along and we've just been able to get access to it. So I love that, but I love the means of how we get there, I suppose, as well.
Fantastic. I love that too. And it's interesting. I came from a world where everything was always planned. Every meeting was planned. And now, not that I don't do any planning and preparation of me and everything else, it's a little bit more freewheeling, and I quite like that sense of just see what happens, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but I also think there's something about you can only freewheel, you can only go off at tangents if you've done that planning beforehand. So I'd done a soft skills training, and it's like this one thing kept being pushed to the next session because it was over a series of sessions, because they were asking such great questions and getting such insight that I was sort of there going, okay, so what? Yeah, we need to expand, allow this to expand. They're getting insight. What can move? What can go into the next session? And I had allowed sort of the last couple of sessions were, let's leave those blank currently and let's just see what moves in there, what emerges. But I could only have done that, I think, if I'd have done the planning to start off with, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I tell myself.
So we're talking about metaphors, and we're talking about how that can be really powerful in the context of business, in the context of our lives, and how we use them. What initially drew you to explore the use of metaphors in business?
Because I, as a procurement professional, it meant that our stakeholders listened to us. I don't know if anybody listening can relate to procurement. They're banging on the door going, listen to me, and coming out with a whole load of long terms, theory, and you just yawn, really. And I don't blame you. But the thing was, from a procurement point of view, we knew that the organisation wasn't looking after its suppliers. And we had to find a way of engaging those managers, leaders in the organisation to change how they were engaging with suppliers. And we invited them to a session to design a garden. And as soon as we saw the benefits of, well, what do you need? What characteristics, what criteria do we need to design a garden? We need to think about why we're doing it. We need to think about what plants, where we put them, what care we give them. And as soon as you start saying, that's the same for suppliers, the penny dropped. And it's like we'd gone on for months trying to get people to change how they were managing suppliers. But they were saying, our suppliers are great. As soon as you start talking about a garden, they go, oh, I have got a few weeds suppliers. I have got a supplier that's like that tree with its roots undermining the house. Oh, and you mean I have to give the plant stroke suppliers the conditions that they need to thrive? Because I think, and I think it's still true, a lot of organisations think suppliers just can get plonked anywhere and will just deliver. And it's like, well, no, they need support, they may need information. Is our culture right for them? And it just opened up. So I think for me, and that was the mid-90s, where suddenly the power of metaphor, because basically they knew this much about, quite a lot. So say 80% about gardening and only 20% about supplier management. And as soon as you say the two are similar, then suddenly what they know about supplier management increases greatly. And then we're not knocking on doors, they're coming to us and saying, can you help us? We have got a supplier. Actually, it's a good supplier, but we think we've got it planted in the wrong place. What can we do to help it thrive? What conditions, etc. So it just, it was just brilliant. And then I suppose I then realised, because that was gardening and supplier management, and then I realised, nature nature's landscapes can be a metaphor for our lives. And so that's where Landscaping a Life was born, in just using nature as a metaphor, because most people understand nature's patterns.
And was that an intentional approach to the supply management, as in using metaphors as a garden? Was that a thing, I'm going to do this, it's really helpful? Did it just sort of come out in a natural way with yourself?
It comes back to your first question, is what do I enjoy? I enjoy coming up with things that are different. So even, like I recently did some training. I did it to like 1,500 people, but I was constantly looking at different ways. That didn't quite work. What can we change? So I'm always looking at doing things differently in order to get things to land and to keep me excited and alive, because otherwise, nothing like a trainer turning up and delivering something and sounding boring. So I think some of it was just our desire to do something different. And I suppose a kernel of an idea that might work, and then trying it and then going, how cool is that? And then we did a series of workshops using that as a base, and it just got better and better, I suppose, as we got more confident at the fact that we weren't going to have people standing up and walking out the room.
Why do you think metaphors are as powerful as what you've just explained there? What is it about the human brain? What is it about our psyche that goes, actually, this really helps me?
Because there is theory to suggest that it just talks to a different part of our brain. So if we've got our logical thinking brain, which is what a lot of these people were doing about these suppliers, then they're going, I like this supplier. And then they defend their supplier, and they defend why, because we might be saying that supplier's not delivering. So I think metaphor works because it bypasses the story we're telling about the situation. So, and that's why I suppose, have really dived into it, because I'm the world's worst at defending my own position. So if I'm stuck, I'll defend the fact that I'm stuck and that there aren't any other solutions. And yes, I've already tried that, and it is that other person's fault. And I'm not alone. And therefore, if we try and solve the problem, I wish I could remember it now, but somebody sort of said, we all become experts at the problem. You know what I mean? It's like we just spend loads of time looking at the problem and telling ourselves we've got a problem, and we keep looking at the problem. And metaphor enables us to step out and notice patterns. And it's talking to a deeper part of us, I would say, our inner wisdom, because quite often what I notice in coaching is people come up with things that enable them, that answer was there all along. I just hadn't seen it. So I see it as, it's a bit like a metaphor, takes us out of the weeds and enables us to have a better vantage point. I know that's using a metaphor to describe a metaphor, but that's what happens. It's like we're not caught up in the weeds. We're not caught up in defending anything, because there isn't any data to defend. It's just going, that supplier needs time in the greenhouse and I didn't realise. And I've given it no TLC whatsoever. Is it any wonder it's floundering?
And do you think how our brains work, that metaphors almost simplify things for us? Take, for example, if you're feeling, frustrated about a situation, or you're challenged about getting through a challenge, and you come up and your brain goes, it feels like my head is hitting against a brick wall, which is a metaphor. Obviously, you're not really hitting your head against a brick wall. Is it a way of our brains just simplifying something?
Absolutely.
And
yes.
Expressing it that way?
Yes, because if we were to say to somebody all about our problem, we might be there 2 hours later still giving more data. And some people do it that way. Whereas as soon as we say, I feel like I'm head against a brick wall, then people go, oh yeah, I know the patterns. That means that you've tried it a few times, you're getting frustrated. So they already know the characteristics of that. What people don't know is the fact that as soon as they give that metaphor, well, I would suggest, as soon as you provide that metaphor's got the solution within it. And that's the bit that I get really frustrated about, because we band around these beautiful idioms with powerful metaphors in them, and it's as if we come up with this metaphor or an idiom, I would say, with a metaphor contained within it that's got some powerful insight in it, and then it's as if we ignore it completely and go flip chart. Now let's focus on the problem. Let's write all what we know. It's like you've just said it's like banging your head on a brick wall. So let's explore that brick wall. How big is the brick wall? Because actually quite often when we use brick walls, it's like talking to a brick wall, or I'm banging my head on the brick wall. If you look at the metaphor, brick walls are not infinitely high, infinitely wide, infinitely long. And yet our language, when we say it's like talking to a brick wall, or even hitting my head up against it, sort of tells us that it is infinite. And as soon as we start looking at the absolute accurateness, I suppose, of the metaphor, then suddenly we go, oh, this is a wall I could get around, or I could demolish, or... because why am I banging my head on the brick wall? Why is the brick wall there? Who put the brick wall there? And we just end up with some interesting conversations, which are, delving into a deeper part of us. And then ends up with insight that says, oh, I put the brick wall there. It's me getting frustrated, not that other person. I just don't understand that other person, or whatever the insight is, that then enables us to act differently, rather than sit there just frustrated with the other person.
That's really helpful. And I think that's the key thing isn't it? Your brain is interpreted something quite complex for whatever reason, however it's feeling, simplifies it in a metaphor. But we need, rather than say moving forward, it's exploring that metaphor, isn't it? And understanding it more. How do you, in a group context, say people have some challenges and some situations that are very complex, how do you get them into a place where they start to share it or talk it in a metaphor language to try and almost simplify and make it that it's a thing they can share amongst each other, type of thing?
Is this a shared problem? As in, is it a common problem that they've all got? Is it that one person's got a problem and they want help from another group, from the rest of the group?
Could be a shared problem, actually.
Yeah. So I think about a professional body I did a session with, where they were doing a vision setting day, and before they started talking about what their vision was, so it sort of ends up being a pre-activity, I sent them all out. Thankfully we've got the session in the middle of this beautiful countryside, put them into groups and said, I just want you to walk around nature and notice the patterns that relate to this organization and where it is currently possibly and where you'd like it to be. And one group, and I so wish I'd now gone and taken a picture, but anyway, I didn't. One group went down this path, and it was one of those country lanes where you could see it was sort of going to end in a dead end because there was sort of more and more grass coming up in the middle. So somebody said to the group, oh, it feels like we're stuck in a rut. And so they then had a conversation from that metaphor point of view about, well, yeah, if it's a dead end, this feels like what the organization's doing. The fact that, if we continue to do what we're doing, we're going to come to a dead end. It's, the green grass is that nobody else is coming with us, etc., etc. And then and this is the beauty of nature, is that they saw a pattern in nature that they could all relate to. And then a few steps later, somebody saw a solution and said, oh, there's a hole in the hedge. And thankfully, it didn't have barbed wire. Every fence I've seen since to try and take a picture to emulate this, I always got barbed wire in it. Anyway, this one didn't. And so they all pushed through this this hole. And in this instance, they had to walk up a bank. So they walked up a bank and then they got to the top of the hill and then you could see for miles. So they then all stood looking at each other going, okay, we have a choice. We either continue going down the rut or we need to do something different. We need to break through it. It's not going to be easy. There's some pushing that we need to do to go through the hole. But you know what? Look at, the world's our oyster sort of thing. Now, each group came back. There was three or four groups. Each group came back with a different metaphor, but all much more inspired, because if you think about it, if most of them were resonating with we're stuck in a rut, we're heading for a dead end, that's a really difficult mindset to be in to solve problems. So going out into nature sort of got them to the art of the possible to come back and then go, I suppose, reverse engineer it a bit to say, oh, okay, so we're not stuck in a rut. We have an option. There's all these different metaphorical solutions, which we then wrote down, and then it's okay. So what do we do differently? But what I have noticed is that quite often the metaphor just gets people's overwhelm and despondency and negativity about the current situation. It dispenses it. So I say the overwhelm is reduced, but really what happens is that fight or flight, oh my God, this is awful, dissipates, and therefore we are able to access our prefrontal cortex and then go, oh right, yeah, of course it's possible. We just need to do something different. What does that different look like? Everybody's in the right mindset to do that, and therefore they came up with a strategy which I believe was more inspirational and more motivating as a result of dispensing with the negativity by going for that walk.
I suppose there's a number of things going on there. I think the fact that you took them outside as well, didn't you? Which is obviously helpful.
Yeah.
Being with nature, sort of lowers our cortisols, makes us think more open thinking, and then using that whole sort of looking for patterns and trends and everything within nature. I think it's a fantastic exercise. That would be quite inspirational. And then I guess from that, they created their vision, their strategy that came out.
They did normal strategy developing, other than they did come up with what would it look like from a nature point of view. So I have done it where people come up with drawings. So it's like they draw the current landscape, and then they come up with the aspirational landscape, and then they're able to talk about, well, how do I get from one to the other? Which still, again, I think there's a part of being able to stand in that end landscape and know it's possible. Yeah.
And what do you think in terms of, I'm just keeping with teams here, keeping with sort of groups, in what ways can metaphors almost enhance that sort of team collaboration and understanding?
I think it's that quite often teams have idioms that they're all using, and it enables them to have what does it mean when we say this? So there's one organization we work with where they quite often use, because of their end product, that they use going around the buoy. So some of it is about being able to embrace a common language, to be able to understand the common metaphor, really. But I think the other thing is that because metaphor steps out of the weeds and the data and the content, people don't feel under attack. They don't feel judged, because we're not judging the content that they're saying I'm stuck. We're exploring the metaphor, and people don't get so defensive about metaphor. So it sort of reduces the barriers to people hearing solutions from other people, and to also, if we can have a common, here's the common problem, how would we describe it? So I did this with one group where they had a list of idioms. So, can't see the wood for the trees, going round in circles. So they had a list. There's a number in my book, but my podcast also has a large number. So uphill struggle. So got each group. So I think in this instance, there was about 5 or 6 groups, and got each group to pick a problem that they had within the team that they wanted to resolve. And then to pick an idiom that said, so which of these idioms best describes this situation? And so each group came up with a different idiom. And then it was about, okay, so fine, if you can't see the wood for the trees, or, if people are here from America or whatever, then it's can't see the woods for the trees or can't see the forest for the trees, dependent on where you are in the world. But if you can't see the wood for the trees about a situation, what would you do in a real wood? Now, I have done this. I mean, it's great if you can do it in real wood, because there are all sorts of solutions tip up. But, what would you do? I'd follow a path. I'd get a map. I had one group of execs in the wood, and they were all choosing different idioms. But I don't like a wood warden, went past, and we were obviously looking confused. And the warden said, "Oh, do you need a map? Are you lost?" It's like, you couldn't have made that up, really. So it's that whole, do we need a map? Have we got a map? What does the map look like in this situation? So it just enables us to do it without any judgment, without anybody getting defensive about you're attacking me because I haven't got a map or a plan. It's like, well, what sorts of maps? Even if we decide we want a map, do we want a driving map? Do we want a walking map? What are we going to put on it? You could go and get a map, and say, is this the sort of map we want? Or go and get 2 maps or 3 maps of the area and go, oh, we've got this sort of map. Ours is a map for kidlets, as I call them, for kids, and we need a driving map. And so we have got a map. It's just not the right sort of map. Or it's not got the right amount of detail, or it's got too much detail. It's like, do we want a map that's only over the 1 mile square, or do we want one that's 50 miles square or whatever? Or do we want the whole of the UK or the whole of the world in the map? So as soon as you can tell, as soon as you start talking about a metaphor and a map, we could have a whole session just on what's your map look like.
It's really helpful, isn't it? It almost conceptualizes it. I like the idea of the fact that if people can't see the woods for the trees, and if they're physically in the woods, what would you do? And it's like, physically, well, what would you do? We'd either step out of the wood and look from a different perspective, and there's all different ways, as you can say, you can unpick that. What might be the, not that I'm sure there isn't, downside of using metaphors a lot in an organization? What could be a concern that if you keep using metaphors and expressing everything in a metaphor?
I think there is any. I think the thing is that if you've got new people, it requires people to get on side to using the process. So quite often I'll introduce metaphors once people are a bit more confident and comfortable with me. So it's like in the soft skills training, I didn't introduce metaphor until, sessions 3 or 4. So I think if a group gets really good at it, what they've got to do is then have some form of, introduction to new people to say, look, we use metaphors. This is why. I think the other thing is that it is about, not just leaving it at the metaphor. So it is allowing time to say, we've explored the metaphor. Now, what does it mean? And I think the other thing is that if what we're doing is working, we don't need to go via the metaphor. We can actually just go, let's come up with a plan, and let's not have to go, keep going and doing it. It's using it when we're really stuck and we don't know what to do, and everybody's agreeing we don't know what to do. And I quite often say it's when people have used more traditional ways of problem solving, because it does feel a bit awkward unless you're used to it. You might get a bit of resistance. So if you can do it as not quite as a last resort, but there is something that says, you've tried other things, it's not worked. We've still got this problem. So let's try something. And I suppose my languaging around it is quite often, dearest logical brain, we're sending you on a coffee break. It's only 45 minutes, an hour. You can come back later. So there's a whole load of positioning that calms people down, that this is just an intervention when we all agree we don't know what to do, or we all agree we've been round and round in circles and we're missing something. So is that, that's when metaphor really works. Or I suppose you could argue, look, we're having arguments here. No, everybody is in transition. We're not shifting mindsets. We're all sitting in our little camps, and telling ourselves that we're right. Now, what problem-solving tools do we know that enable us to get around that? Now, if there's logical ones, I'd say use those first, because they're always going to be more easily taken on. However, I suspect a lot of them don't, because a lot of them enable people to stay in their little camps. So metaphor enables people to meet somewhere, agree without realizing what they're agreeing. And then they come back and it's as if their story has changed, but so has everybody else's. So it's like they come back, sit down and oh, that situation isn't as I thought it was, but they're all doing that. And then they can come up with, okay, so what does this mean in practice? So in some respects, the metaphor doesn't always give the solution, but the metaphor changes the mindset. That's the first time.
What are your thoughts? No. What are your thoughts on when people share a metaphor, an individual shares a metaphor about a scenario because they're trying to express it, and obviously that's their metaphor. And do you think the fact that other people might interpret that metaphor differently, is that where this is where the magic happens, because they might have a different perspective? If somebody's sharing a problem, but they're sharing it as a metaphor in that sense, and whatever it might be, can't see the woods for the trees or something like that, and somebody might interpret it slightly differently, is that where people the magic happens?
Yes and no. If it is a person's problem, so if I can't see the wood for the trees about a problem that is mine, then if we're in a group, I quite often have to be really careful, because what happens is other people look in and start telling the person, oh, you just need to get to a higher vantage point. And that's not how they're engaging with their landscape. So really careful if it's one person's problem to let them ask questions. Absolutely. Is there, would a higher vantage point be helpful? But be really careful. I suppose it's similar with, in a coaching context, but that's their metaphor. And from a clean metaphor point of view, then, I'm assuming that, spring follows winter, etc. That might not be the case in some people's minds. So if it's a one person's problem, then yes, ask questions to help them expand it, but we have to stick with their vision. If it's a group one, then absolutely. People might go, because I quite often say one of the quickest ones is draw a mountain. So they all might draw a mountain that represents the current situation. And then I go, so now draw the mountain with a solution contained in it. And they all then will say different things. So one person might say there aren't any paths. Somebody else might say, do we even need to climb the mountain? But so actually they're all coming up with different things, but none of them are really contradictory, because all we've said is, this is your metaphor. Let's look at solutions. And then we've got a lovely list of, is it about deciding we don't want to climb the mountain? And then when you relate it back to the real life situation, then the group will have heard all of these metaphors and then be able to go, oh, yeah, actually, we do want to go climb a hill, but yeah, it doesn't need to be, Everest type oxygen needing mountain. Why are we doing that? And so everybody might agree that. So I think it absolutely helps having input. We just have to be careful we're not imposing something on somebody that they then resist, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I love it when my clients, one-on-one clients, come up with a metaphor, because I find them really helpful to explore, as you say, because I think sometimes your body, your system, your brain expresses something in a way that can't be expressed normal way, and a metaphor just sums it up. It's painting a picture, it's storytelling, it does so much more for the individual, and I love exploring it, because I think it's a good way of unpicking and getting through to the problem and coming up with a solution. I think it's powerful in itself. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Alison, and it's been really helpful and insightful as well, in terms of how to use metaphors in that context of business. If people want to get in touch with you and connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
There's lots of Alison Smith. So although it is alisonsmith.co as the website, best thing would be Landscaping Your Life, because that'll find the podcast, the book, and me in various. So if you did Landscaping Life on LinkedIn, YouTube, you'd find me. Similarly on various other social media. So yeah, Landscaping Your Life would find me, but Landscaping Life Alison, even better.
Well, thank you for your time today, Alison.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.